Welcome to the Did These 6 Old Testament Prophets Actually Exist video. All right, so Christians and those who believe in the Bible, they believe that Adam, the first man, existed about 4,000 years ago, so about 6,000 years from now, 2019. And he lived for 930 years, according to the Bible, up until 3070 BC, approximately. And these are estimates, and these are Bible dates. They're not of actual fact. Okay, scientific evidence does not support the idea that the entire human population descends from a single man. Scientific evidence does not support it, that we came from one man or one woman, Adam and Eve, and you can look at the sources here. Okay, the majority view among scholars is that the book of Genesis dates from the Persian period, which is the 5th and 4th centuries BC, more than 3,500 years after Adam supposedly existed. So scholars say that the book of Genesis, which talks about Adam, was written in the Persian period 3,500 years after Adam was said to exist. Okay, the book of Genesis is said to be written by Moses, but according to Christians and those who believe in the Bible and Jews, Moses supposedly existed 2,609 years after Adam. So how could Moses have written the book if he didn't exist until 2,609 years later? Okay, the story of the fall of Adam is often considered to be an allegory. There is physical evidence that Adam and Eve never existed. Findings in genetics are incompatible with there being a single first pair of human beings. This is from the Wikipedia article Adam and Eve. Okay, modern scholars consider the Genesis creation narrative with Adam and Eve as one of various ancient origin myths. So modern scholars say that Adam and Eve are a mythology. Analysis, like the documentary hypothesis, also suggests that the text of Genesis is a result of the compilation of multiple previous traditions. So it wasn't just one source from Moses. It was from a number of authors, multiple previous traditions, which explains apparent contradictions. Other stories of the same canonical book, like the Genesis flood narrative, are also understood as having been influenced by older literature, with parallels in the older Epic of Gilgamesh. Okay, with scientific developments in paleontology, geology, biology, and other disciplines, it was discovered that humans and all other living things, all animals, all living things, share the same common ancestor, which evolved through natural processes over billions of years to form the life that we see today. All from the same common ancestor, and we know that the very first living thing on the planet was a prokaryote cell, single-celled organism, and then all life sprang from that. Okay, so according to Christians and other people who believe in the Bible, there was also Noah, who supposedly lived 2,944 BC to 1,994 BC for about 950 years. So right there, that should tell you that he probably wasn't a real guy, as nobody can live 950 years. Okay, so according to David A. Leeming, the Genesis flood narrative is a flood myth found in chapters 6 through 9 in the book of Genesis. So the flood narrative of a worldwide flood is a myth. Okay, a global flood as described in this myth is inconsistent with the physical findings of geology and paleontology. You can look at the source here, David R. Montgomery. His work is The Rocks Don't Lie. A geologist investigates Noah's flood, and you can look at all the other sources on here. Okay, what about flood geology? A different kind of geology, I guess. It is a branch of creationism known as flood geology, and it is a pseudoscientific attempt to argue that such a global flood actually occurred when it did not. You can read Mark Isaac in the Counter-Creationism Handbook. Okay, the general mythological exaggeration and the implausibility of the story are widely recognized by relevant academic fields. Try getting 2 of every species of animal onto a boat. It's pretty much impossible. The acknowledgement of this follows closely the development of understanding of our natural history, and especially the geology and paleontology of the planet. Again, you can read The Rocks Don't Lie, a geologist investigates Noah's flood. Okay, so the fact that the worldwide flood never occurred, according to science, casts a lot of doubt upon whether Noah actually existed, and we know he couldn't be as old as they said he was in there, and there's some other evidence that I won't go into as well that states that Noah never did exist. Okay, let's go to another popular prophet in the Old Testament. That's Abraham. He supposedly existed 2052 BC to 1877 BC for about 175 years, which we know is impossible as well. Okay, the Abraham story cannot be definitively related to any specific time, and it is widely agreed that the patriarchal age, along with the Exodus and the period of the Judges, is a late literary construct, not at the time that Abraham was supposed to have existed. It's a late literary construct that does not relate to any period in actual history. And you can read M. Paula McNutt's book, Reconstructing the Society of Ancient Israel. Okay, a common hypothesis among scholars is that the Abraham story was composed in the early Persian period. That's the late 6th century BC. That's 6, not 1900 BC. So the story came way later, and Abraham's story was a result of the tensions between Jewish landlords who had stayed in Judah during the Babylonian captivity and the returning exiles. So there was a lot of tension between those Jews and the returning exiles. Okay, archaeologists have given up hope of recovering any context that would make Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob credible historical figures. Given up hope of ever proving that they existed. That's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We didn't really talk much about Isaac or Jacob. The source for this is William G. Deaver, 2002. What did the biblical writers know, and when did they know it? Okay, the Abraham story, like those of the other patriarchs, most likely had a substantial oral prehistory. So passed down verbally from one generation to the next. As most people know or can think about, it's not going to be that accurate. You just telling your kids telling their kids, and oral history is not that accurate unless it was written down pretty close to the time of when it happened. It's not going to be that accurate. Okay, let's go to the popular prophet Moses. I think he is the most important prophet for the Jews. According to those who believe in the Bible, he existed about 1391 BC to 1271 BC for about 120 years, so he would have been very old, but maybe not impossible for that time, 120 years. Okay, an article in the Biblical Archaeologist. It says that scholarly consensus sees Moses as a legendary figure and not a historical person. Scholarly consensus sees Moses as a legendary figure and not a historical person, kind of like Thor pictured above. No Egyptian sources mention Moses or the events of Exodus/Deuteronomy, nor has any archaeological evidence been discovered in Egypt or the Sinai wilderness to support the story in which Moses is the central figure. No Egyptian sources, no archaeological evidence has been discovered in Egypt or the Sinai wilderness to support the story of Moses. And this is from William G. Deaver's book again. Okay, the story of Moses' discovery in the river there. He was kind of floating down the river as a baby or as a child. This story picks up a familiar motif in ancient Near Eastern mythological accounts of the ruler who rises from humble origin. So that is a popular motif in Near Eastern mythological accounts. No source mentions Moses until he emerges in the texts associated with the Babylonian exile, which was about 597 BC, not 1300 BC. So nothing mentions him until way later than when he was supposed to have existed. Okay, let's talk a little bit about King David. He was supposed to exist about 1000 BC to 930 BC for about 70 years. 70 years is possible. Okay, so this picture here is King David's empire, at least it was supposed to have been. It's that dark red area north and south of Jerusalem there. David's kingdom, area under direct central administration, according to people that believe in the Bible. But let's read this. Historians of the ancient Near East agree that David probably existed around 1000 BC. So historians think that he did actually exist, but that there is little that can be said about him as a historical figure. We don't have much data about him. Just his name, I think, on some old historical tablets, I guess, or historical records. Scholars generally doubt that the United Monarchy, which was David's kingdom, as described in the Bible, existed. So scholars generally doubt that his kingdom in the Bible existed. This is Wikipedia, the David article. There is little about David that is concrete and undisputed. Little about David that is concrete and undisputed. All reconstructions from biblical sources for the United Monarchy, which was David's kingdom, are examples of academic wishful thinking. All reconstructions of David's kingdom are examples of academic wishful thinking. This according to Donald B. Redford, the book Egypt, Canaan, and Israel in Ancient Times. There is a lack of archaeological evidence for David's military campaigns. This according to the book The Bible Unearthed. Okay, Jacob L. Wright, Associate Professor of Hebrew Bible at Emory University, has written that the most popular legends about David, including his killing of Goliath, David and Goliath, his affair with Bathsheba, and his ruling of a united kingdom of Israel rather than just a small area in Judah, are the creation of those who lived generations after him. So all those stories are the creation of those who lived generations after him, in particular those living in the late Persian or Hellenistic periods. So a lot of these stories from these Bible patriarchs that we've gone over in this video are from the Persian period, not like thousands of years before. This is from his article, David, King of Judah, Not Israel, in BibleInterp.com. And the last Bible patriarch we have is the prophet Daniel. He was supposed to have existed 620 BC to 538 BC for about 82 years. The consensus of modern scholars is that Daniel never existed, and the book of Daniel is a cryptic allusion to the reign of the 2nd century BC Greek king named Antiochus IV Epiphanes. Antiochus IV Epiphanes. This according to John J. Collins. So of these 6 Old Testament prophets, it looks like only one may have existed. They're not sure. That was King David. For the other 5, there's actually pretty good evidence that they did not exist. Good scientific evidence, archaeology, textual analysis, etc. And that's going to do it for this video, and I thank you for watching Did These 6 Old Testament Prophets Actually Exist video.